huge changes have taken place in the way countries around the world are run. As I predicted would happen many weeks ago, governments everywhere have been taking full advantage of the manufactured crisis. The Hong Kong government extended its COVID-19 regulations, banning gatherings of more than 8 people until the 4th of June, coincidentally covering plans to commemorate the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, which just happened to take place on the 4th of June 1989. And the coronavirus has given the Chinese a tough new national security law. What a surprise. In the UK, legislation is on the way which will remove the right of shareholders to attend the annual general meetings of the companies they co-own. They'll not be able to challenge company directors. The change is said to be temporary, but these days the word temporary appears to be synonymous with the word permanent. Meanwhile, those same directors are taking huge loans from the government. The government may well then take shares in those companies, turning them into state-owned, nationalised zombie companies. When governments subsidise big companies, the end result is rarely a happy one. It's scandalous that company owners should lose control, and everyone with a pension will be affected by this. Everything that's happened is about them taking control and turning us into slaves. This isn't conspiracy theory stuff, it isn't paranoia, it's very real. The baddie from all those James Bond movies, the one who wants to rule the world, is well on his way to taking control. Actually, of course, there isn't just one baddie, there are a number of them. Doctors have spoken out and have dared to point out that this isn't a plague bug and that the dangers have been exaggerated. But they have been quickly punished. I've seen evidence that one eminent doctor was, just a day or two ago, struck off the medical register in the UK for 12 months for daring to voice his doubts about the official line on social media. Whatever happened to free speech and human rights? Article 6 of the Human Rights Act gives us the right to a fair trial, and Article 10 allows freedom of expression. Long gone. I doubt if he'll be the last doctor to learn that silent obedience is now as essential as a stethoscope and illegible handwriting. From the moment I first spoke out about this fake crisis, I've been demonised, monstered and traduced all over the internet by lies and clever distortions. I've been writing about international drug companies for half a century, and I'm accustomed to their methods, but things have got far worse than they've ever been before. When a government suppresses information or opinions, then the end result is inevitably oppression and tyranny, and we're seeing a good deal of that. The advice being given by the experts is laughably inconsistent. They say you can catch it from people with no symptoms, but they say you can't. They say you don't get immunity when you've had it, but they say you do. They say there'll be a vaccine by the end of the summer, but they say it'll take 5 years to make one. People have been advised by experts to leave the loo seat up all the time so that it's touched less frequently. Unfortunately, the experts don't seem to know that when you flush the loo with the seat up, the atmosphere is filled with an aerosol spray full of bugs, which will spread dangerous infections in the area and all the room's surfaces. As usual, we're making things worse. Every time anyone with a little independence offers a sliver of hope, that sliver of hope is crushed by paid-for mouthpieces who invent facts to fit the official agenda. Governments are now busy creating fake news and then blaming the truth-tellers for spreading fake news. It's a classic misinformation process. And of course they say you must wear a mask, even though it's perfectly possible that the wearing of masks will kill more people than would have died if they'd caught the coronavirus. Anyone who says masks are perfectly safe to wear forever is, in my view, probably a fool, a liar, or working for the BBC. 2 boys died in China, remember, when wearing masks while exercising. Masks dehumanize us and make us both fearful and falsely confident. We associate masks with surgeons, dentists and robbers. Masks also fit in nicely with the modern gender-neutral philosophy which is being used to damage our individuality. Many hospitals all over the world are closed to patients with cancer, heart disease and other potential killers, even though the storm of patients with COVID-19 never materialized. The UK government wasted £200 million of taxpayers' money building temporary Nightingale hospitals, which lay pretty well empty. And the irony is that a fifth of all the patients in the UK who contracted the coronavirus caught it in hospital. Another indictment proving that hospitals are still not good enough at preventing the spread of infection within their walls. The average age of those dying of the coronavirus was over 80, and this isn't surprising since 25,000 elderly hospital patients were dumped into care homes to make way for the tsunami of COVID-19 patients, which never came. Those patients were discharged without being tested to see if they'd picked up the coronavirus when in hospital, and so the care homes, full to the brim with patients who were aged and ill, became the killing fields. Care homes in England and Wales contain only 3% of pensioners, but 29% of COVID-19 deaths occurred within their walls. Governments everywhere will save huge sums of money as a result of all these deaths. Although we are bombarded with statistics, it's difficult to get hold of accurate figures, but my conservative estimate is that in the UK the government will save £200 million a year as a direct result of all those early deaths of elderly patients. In the UK, there are 2.4 million cancer patients waiting for treatment or investigations. Many of them will die before they get what they need. There'll be 10 million people on waiting lists by Christmas. Many of them are in agony, and they too will be dead before they get halfway up the waiting list. People wake up every morning crying in pain and despair, and hospital departments still stay shut. Pubs and hairdressers are opening, but some hospital departments are staying shut. Thousands will die unnecessarily from asthma, diabetes and coronary heart disease. The only bright spot on the mortality figures will be that very few will have died from the ordinary flu this year. They were all put down as having died from COVID-19. And charities won't be able to help much. The big charities in the UK are facing a shortfall of £10 billion this year. They'll all want government bailouts. Many smaller charities will go bankrupt. There's little solace to be found in our institutions. Churches, mosques and synagogues are closed, although pubs and hairdressers and zoos will be open. Our church leaders have betrayed us and abandoned us to our fate. And the royal family, particularly the Queen, will be tucked away out of sight for their safety, because all icons can be a comfort and a centre point for protest and revolution. But although it's claimed that schools and churches and hospitals can't open because of the social distancing laws, the police condone mass demonstrations which threaten to disrupt society and which therefore suit the aims of those who would like to be in charge. The resultant damage will be unbelievable. The Bank of England says that the UK economy is set to fall by 14% this year. My guess is that's a mega understatement. That's the biggest decline since 1706, even on their optimistic thought. In the United States, joblessness is on the scale of the 1930s. Around the world, the laws are getting tighter and more intrusive. There are laws about lockdowns, social distancing and mask wearing, and in the UK the police in London even used the excuse of a demonstration to introduce a curfew. There are signs that the social distancing will be permanent. Cities and towns are already widening pavements so that pedestrians can safely keep their distance from one another. Cycle lanes are being enhanced too, and the result will be less space for motor cars, more congestion, slower speeds. How long will it be before there are special traffic lanes for the important people to use? That was common in the Soviet Union, and it was tried in England for the London Olympics. Confusion about what is and is not allowed has reached absurd levels. One German state has abandoned plans to reopen brothels because they're worried that hookers and punters will rush to the state from neighbouring areas where the brothels are still closed. Jonathan Sumption, a former Supreme Court judge who, it's reasonable to think, understands the law as well as anyone in the UK, has pointed out that sex with a person from another household is classified as a gathering for the purpose of social interaction. This means, apparently, that it's now legal, providing that it happens in the daytime and not at night, and that the sexual activity takes place in the garden and not in the house, unless a sex worker is involved, in which case the sexual activity can take place indoors and at night, because it'll be necessary for work purposes. The mass market media, bought and paid for, enthusiastically spread whatever lies they're told to spread. They ramp up the fear with new horror stories. I've no doubt that BBC dramas will make social distancing and lockdowns seem normal and essential. It's now possible to discern a pattern and a purpose in all this. Look around the world and you can see what they've planned for us. In 2017, the Chinese gathered DNA and iris scans to create a massive database. The Chinese police were also gathering blood types and fingerprints. There's not much left. By June 2019, the Chinese required mandatory face scans for would-be phone users. Buy a new phone and you wouldn't be given a new number unless or until you'd had your ID verified with a face scan. Consumers were reported to have welcomed all this new technology. In Russia, people who are self-isolating have to take photographs of themselves on their mobile phones, using a special app, of course, to prove that they are in their homes. In Ohio, in the United States, when 4,800 school children eventually return to school, they will wear electronic beacons to track their locations through the day. The beacons will enable the authorities to record where students sit, who they meet, and so on. Naturally, all this is to prevent another outbreak of the coronavirus. If the technology works, it will doubtless spread faster than the coronavirus itself. Small businesses have been destroyed in their thousands. At the same time, big businesses have been enriched and strengthened with huge grants, the money handed over by politicians without the knowledge or the approval of the taxpayers. There are still plenty of vulnerable people, the elderly, the frail, the disabled, who are still alive, still costing money, and still weakening the gene pool. They have to be exterminated. This was always part of the plan, and I've no doubt that things are going to get worse. If we don't stop it soon, it'll be too late. The plan will be unstoppable. We're destined to become slaves in a society where freedom and democracy are no more than words in dictionaries that will doubtless be banned. Why did governments deliberately destroy their own economies? So that they could rebuild them. This is a battle for control, money and power, and it was triggered by a minor virus that just happened to be handy at the right time. A Division 4 virus leapt into history through timing. The British economic downturn is forecast to be the worst in the G7. The British will be the hardest hit of all the major economies. The cause? Not even Boris and his fellow buffoons are this incompetent, surely. It must have been planned. If there isn't a second wave of the coronavirus or a new infection from a new deadly virus, it will only be because they're scared that too many people know and have shared the truth about their attempted takeover of our lives. They need to shut us in to weaken us. Masks will, despite their lies, make us weaker and more vulnerable. Locking us in will deprive of us vitamin D. Our immunity to other infections will fall as we're kept locked indoors and away from other people. The brainwashing will continue in exactly the way I described in a previous video called Coronavirus, You've Been Brainwashed, Here's How They Did It. If you haven't watched it, please find it and watch it. They are using every trick known to the behavioural psychologists. They want to create the circumstances for war so as to frighten us with that. They want to divide us from our friends and our neighbours, to weaken us, to break us up into separate factions, black and white, believers and non-believers, and so on, so that we're busy hating one another rather than hating them. But if they can get away with a second wave, then afterwards there'll probably be a third wave and a fourth wave until the zombies are begging for their vaccines and their subcutaneous implants. We're fighting for our present, our future, and our children's future, and it's going to be a difficult fight. Trillions have been borrowed from future generations who will, having been kept out of school, probably not been numerate enough or literate enough to realise what's happened to their world. Our real problems are not the mad scientists or the madder politicians, but the zombies, the people who accept the lies they're told without question, who dutifully wear their masks and step off the pavement to maintain their social distances. I don't like to call these people sheep, by the way. I've kept sheep and they're very intelligent animals. In my experience, they're far brighter than the mathematical modelers and the politicians. None of my sheep ever put the country into unnecessary house arrest. They are using what's called a spiral of silence to oppress us too. Many people now fear that what they're thinking is not what the majority are thinking. They don't believe that the virus merits taking away all our human rights, but they're worried that the majority believe the politicians and the state scientists, and so they stay silent through fear. We have to encourage those who are nervous about speaking out. We have to awaken those who are still frozen with fear. The James Bond baddies, the people who want the control, the power and the money, are talking about a global reset. This is, they say, a good time to reorganize the economy. That's why they desperately need a second wave of the coronavirus. They need to keep us down. They need to keep us oppressed, fearful and cornered. They want to introduce vaccines and identity certificates and intrusive apps that track our every movement. They want to impoverish us and they want total control over the internet. They want to restructure the monetary order. Their aim is social engineering that will lead to a world government with unelected billionaires sitting around the table. They want to introduce eugenics on a big scale, getting rid of the sick and the weak and the frail and the elderly and the vulnerable. They want to remove healthcare from the masses so that more and more of us die. If you don't believe me about the seriousness of what's happening, then I'm really afraid you haven't been paying attention to the facts. This is war. We're on one side. On the other side, there are the governments of the world, the mass media, including the major broadcasters and the professional censors, the fascists who are doing their best to control the internet with lies and propaganda and fake news. But take heart, it's not a fair fight. They have a great deal to win, money, power, control. But we have more to lose, our freedom and our individuality. They want us to be slaves. We want our freedom and our human rights. And so we have more power than they think we have. At the moment, they can't manage without delivery drivers, supermarket workers, factory staff, shop assistants, hospital staff, and so on. If we stand up to them and refuse to accept their lies, then they will lose. And we have to laugh at their insistence that we wear masks and follow their stupid rules. As I said in the first of these two videos, we have more power than we think we have. They want to take our freedom. Wanting to keep it is a stronger emotion. They're just fighting out of greed, but we're fighting for our survival, so we will win. Remember the mantra? Distrust the government, avoid mass media, fight the lies. And if you happen to visit a mass media website, leave polite messages expressing your disgust at their failure to expose the dishonesties and suggesting that people watch some videos which contain the truth. Please share these videos as much as you can. Thank you for watching and thank you for your support and your encouragement. Please copy and share the videos as widely as you can, and if you want to put on a translation, that's fine. If my videos disappear, please visit the website www.vernoncoleman.com to find out where you might be able to see them. The transcripts of my videos are always on the website. Thanks again for watching An Old Man in a Chair. This channel has not been monetized. I haven't authorized any ads and there's no sponsorship. I have no idea where the little ad underneath the video comes from, which seems to promote the government, whichever country you're in. If you want to see more videos from me, please subscribe to my channel because they aren't always easy to find. Let's spread the truth together. Thank you for watching.